At the 150-year mark of their isolation, humanity had become something that defied every assumption the galaxy had made about intelligent life. President Tony Rodriguez stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of New Geneva Station, looking out at representatives from every human settlement in their transformed solar system. The hall itself was a marvel of engineering that existed in folded space, appearing small from the outside but containing enough room for millions of people. "The solar collective is now complete," he announced to the gathered representatives. "Every human settlement, from the smallest research station to our largest cities, is now connected through quantum communication networks that operate faster than the speed of light itself." The achievement represented more than just technological advancement. Humanity had created a truly unified civilization without sacrificing the diversity that made them strong. Each colony maintained its own culture and traditions, but they were all linked by instantaneous communication and shared resources that made conflict between human settlements impossible. Dr. Rachel Clark had spent 30 years perfecting temporal mechanics, the science of manipulating time itself. Her laboratory on Titan existed partially outside normal time flow, allowing her research team to experience subjective years while only minutes passed in the outside universe. "We can now adjust our perception of time at will," she explained to a gathering of humanity's leading scientists. "During research phases, we can slow our subjective experience of time, allowing us to think through complex problems that would normally take years. During routine tasks, we can accelerate our perception, completing in minutes what used to take hours." The implications went far beyond convenience. Humans could now effectively live multiple lifetimes while maintaining peak cognitive abilities throughout their extended existence. A human scientist could experience centuries of research time while aging only decades, allowing for accumulation of knowledge and wisdom that would have been impossible before the quarantine. The asteroid belts between Mars and Jupiter had been transformed into construction yards that spanned millions of cubic kilometers of space. Foreman Steve Murphy oversaw operations that built structures using materials and techniques that existed nowhere else in the known galaxy. "The new habitat ring around Ceres is complete," he reported during the weekly construction briefing. "It can house 2 billion people while remaining completely invisible to outside observation. We're not just building homes anymore. We're building spaces that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously." The construction projects used humanity's mastery of quantum materials and space-folding technology to create living spaces that defied conventional physics, buildings that were larger inside than outside, habitats that existed in pocket dimensions, and transportation networks that moved people and goods through parallel space-time channels. Commander Holly Baker had expanded the Stealth Reconnaissance Division into a network of observers that monitored every major civilization in the galaxy, using phase shift technology that allowed human ships to exist partially outside normal space. Her scouts gathered intelligence while remaining completely undetectable. "The situation in the galaxy is deteriorating faster than we predicted," she reported to the Solar Council. "The Korthak Empire has begun consuming entire star systems, not just for resources but to fuel some kind of massive construction project. The Zephyrians are fragmenting into warring factions that use increasingly destructive weapons against each other. And the Veil Collective has started harvesting the energy from stars themselves for unknown purposes." The intelligence painted a picture of a galaxy in crisis. The 3 major powers were preparing for a conflict that would reshape the known universe, while smaller civilizations either chose sides or tried desperately to remain neutral. The galaxy that had judged humanity as too dangerous was about to tear itself apart through the very behaviors they had condemned in humans. Dr. Susan Martinez led the Advanced Evolution Project, studying the changes occurring in humans born during the quarantine period. Her findings suggested that isolation had triggered rapid, evolutionary development that was still accelerating. Children, born in the last 50 years, show cognitive abilities that surpass anything in recorded galactic history, she reported to the Global Science Council. "They intuitively understand concepts in physics and mathematics that took our best scientists decades to develop. More importantly, they demonstrate natural cooperation and empathy that seems to be hardwired into their genetic structure." The new generation of humans was different in fundamental ways. They worked together instinctively, shared resources without being asked, and showed a natural understanding of complex systems that allowed them to solve problems that had baffled their predecessors. They were becoming something that the galaxy had never seen, a truly cooperative species with godlike capabilities. Captain Alex Wright commanded the Humanitarian Response Fleet, a collection of ships designed for one purpose that would have seemed impossible to the humans of 150 years ago, helping their former captors. The fleet remained hidden but ready, equipped with technologies that could provide aid on a galactic scale. All ships report ready status, he announced during the fleet's monthly readiness check. Medical ships equipped with life extension technology, construction vessels capable of rebuilding entire worlds, and supply ships carrying resources that could feed billions. We're prepared to help anyone who needs it, regardless of what they've done to us. The decision to prepare humanitarian aid for the galaxy that had imprisoned them represented humanity's greatest transformation. Instead of seeking revenge or planning conquest, they were ready to heal the wounds that centuries of galactic conflict had created. Dr. Paul Jackson had achieved the impossible by reverse engineering, not just the barrier technology, but the underlying principles that made it work. His research team had discovered that the barriers were built on mathematical concepts that described the fundamental structure of reality itself. "We understand how the universe works now," he explained to President Rodriguez during a private briefing. "Space, time, matter, energy, consciousness itself. These are all just different expressions of the same underlying mathematical truth. Once you understand that truth, you can modify any of them at will." The knowledge gave humanity abilities that bordered on magic. They could create matter from pure energy, slow or accelerate time, fold space to make distant locations adjacent, and even modify the laws of physics within localized areas. They had become masters of reality itself while remaining humble about their newfound powers. Dr. Jennifer Hayes continued her communication with the Watcher's ancient monitoring systems, learning more about the tests that humanity was unknowingly taking. The criteria for evaluation were complex and multifaceted, examining not just what humans could do but how they chose to use their abilities. "The Watchers are pleased with our progress," she reported to the Solar Council. "We've demonstrated technological advancement without aggression, unity without oppression, and power without corruption. But there's one final test that we haven't faced yet." "What kind of test?" asked Admiral Grace Kelly. "They want to see how we react when we gain the power to judge other species the way we were judged. Will we become like our former captors, deciding who deserves freedom and who should be contained, or will we find a better way?" The test was more relevant than anyone realized. Humanity now possessed technologies that could easily overcome any alien civilization in the galaxy. They could imprison species in barriers like the one that had contained them, or they could use their abilities to force peace through overwhelming power. The question was whether they would choose dominance or cooperation. Engineer Danny Torres had been born after the quarantine began and represented the new generation of humans who had never known the galaxy beyond their solar system. He led projects that created wonders that would have seemed impossible to earlier generations. Cities that existed in multiple dimensions, transportation networks that moved through parallel realities, and communication systems that connected every human consciousness in the solar system. "We're not the same species that was locked away 150 years ago," he said during an interview with the Solar Broadcasting Network. "We've become something new, something that doesn't fit into the old categories of prey and predator, conquered and conqueror. We're something the galaxy has never seen before." The young engineer's words captured the essence of humanity's transformation. They had evolved beyond the competitive, aggressive nature that had made the aliens fear them, but they had retained the creativity and determination that made them human. They had become something that the galaxy's ancient power structures couldn't categorize or control. As monitoring systems throughout the galaxy registered the approaching end of the quarantine period, automated signals began activating across known space. The Galactic Council would soon be notified that humanity's sentence was nearly complete and their evaluation period was ending. But the galaxy that would judge humanity was not the same, one that had locked them away. Wars raged across multiple star systems. Ancient alliances were crumbling. 100 years had passed since the aliens locked humanity away from the galaxy, and Dr. Paul Jackson stood before the most important discovery in human history. The massive research facility built inside Jupiter's Great Red Storm hummed with energy as his team made final adjustments to their breakthrough device. After decades of studying the barrier that trapped them, they had finally cracked the secret of its construction. "Initialize the field generators," Paul called out to his research team. Around him, scientists from every human colony worked together on equipment that shouldn't have been possible to build. The technology required materials that didn't exist in nature, and energy sources that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Yet here it was, humanity's own version of the alien barrier technology, but improved in ways the original designers had never considered. The device activated with a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the fabric of space itself. A shimmering wall of energy appeared in the laboratory, identical to the barrier that surrounded their solar system. But this one was under human control, responding to their commands and bending to their will. "We've done it," whispered Dr. Sarah Kim, Paul's research partner for the past 20 years. "We can create our own barriers, our own pocket dimensions. We're not prisoners anymore, Paul. We're architects of reality itself." The implications were staggering. If humans could create barriers like the one that trapped them, they could also create doorways between dimensions, gateways to other realities, and spaces that existed outside the normal flow of time. They had taken their captor's greatest weapon and turned it into the key to infinite possibilities. Admiral Grace Kelly commanded the Deep Space Monitoring Fleet from her flagship, a vessel that existed partially outside normal spacetime. The ship and its companions could observe the galaxy beyond their prison without being detected, giving humanity its first clear view of what had happened during their century of isolation. What they saw was disturbing. "The Korthak Empire has consumed 3 entire star systems," reported Commander Steve Murphy from the sensor station. "They're not just conquering worlds anymore, Grace. They're strip mining entire solar systems for resources, leaving nothing but empty space behind." Grace studied the tactical displays showing the current state of the galaxy. The Zephyrians were engaged in civil wars that had torn their empire apart, with different factions fighting over philosophical differences about how to deal with younger species. The Veil Collective remained as mysterious as ever, but their territory showed signs of technological stagnation that suggested they were facing their own internal problems. "What about the monitoring stations they placed around our barrier?" she asked. "Still there, but they're automated. No alien crew has personally checked on us in 30 years. I think they've forgotten about us, Admiral." This was both good and bad news. The aliens weren't actively watching humanity's development, which gave them freedom to work without interference. But it also meant that when the quarantine period ended, the galaxy would be completely unprepared for what humanity had become. Dr. Frank Williams had achieved something that defied every law of physics known to galactic civilization. His Genesis project had successfully created artificial pocket universes within their solar system, spaces that were larger inside than outside and contained entire ecosystems of human-designed life forms. "Universe 17 is showing remarkable development," he reported during the monthly science conference. "The life forms we introduced 50 years ago have evolved at accelerated rates due to the modified physical constants we programmed into that space. They've developed intelligence and are beginning to create their own technologies. The Genesis worlds were humanity's greatest achievement and their most closely guarded secret. Each pocket universe contained environments that were impossible in normal space. Worlds where time moved differently. Planets where gravity flowed upward instead of down. Stars that burned with cold fire instead of heat. Humanity had become creators of realities that existed nowhere else in the galaxy." Captain Nina Davis pushed her ship beyond the boundaries of known physics, using space-folding technology that made traditional faster-than-light travel look primitive. The Explorer 1 could cross their entire solar system in seconds, moving through dimensions that existed parallel to normal space. "We're detecting something interesting near the barrier's edge," she reported to headquarters. "There are structures built into the barrier itself, ancient technology that predates the current galactic civilizations by millions of years." The discovery led to humanity's most shocking revelation yet. The barrier wasn't just alien technology. It was built on top of something much older, something left behind by a race that had vanished long before the current galactic powers even existed. These ancient builders had created monitoring systems that recorded everything happening in the galaxy, and those systems were still active. Dr. Jennifer Hayes led the team that made contact with the ancient monitoring systems. The process required technology that existed at the intersection of consciousness research and quantum mechanics, allowing human minds to interface directly with machines that were older than their entire solar system. They call themselves the Watchers, she reported after her first successful communication session. They were the first intelligence to arise in this galaxy, and they've been observing everything that's happened since. Every species that's ever existed, every war that's been fought, every civilization that's risen and fallen, it's all recorded in their systems. The Watchers' records revealed the true history of the galaxy, a story that the current alien powers had either forgotten or deliberately hidden. The galaxy had gone through cycles of growth and destruction for millions of years, with each dominant civilization eventually collapsing due to the same problems: aggression, competition for resources, and the inability to work together peacefully. They've been waiting, Jennifer explained to the assembled leaders of human civilization. The Watchers programmed their systems to identify any species that might be capable of breaking the cycle, of becoming something better than the civilizations that came before. The quarantine hadn't been a punishment after all. It had been a test. Dr. Greg Martinez worked day and night to decode the Watchers' evaluation criteria, trying to understand what humanity needed to prove to pass their ancient judgment. The requirements were complex, involving not just technological advancement but social development, environmental stewardship, and the ability to create without destroying. "We're already meeting most of their criteria," he reported to President Tony Rodriguez, who had led humanity through the middle decades of their isolation. "They want to see a species that can advance technologically, without using that technology for conquest. Check. They want social unity without oppression. Check. They want environmental harmony. Check." "What about the final requirement?" the president asked. Greg hesitated before answering. "They want to see a species that can gain ultimate power without being corrupted by it. That test is still ongoing." The test was more relevant than anyone realized. Humanity now possessed technologies that could reshape reality itself, create and destroy universes, manipulate time and space, and modify the fundamental laws of physics. They had gained godlike powers through their century of isolation, but the real question was what they would do with those powers when the barrier came down. Commander Holly Baker led the Stealth Reconnaissance Division, using technology that allowed human ships to phase partially out of normal spacetime. Her scouts regularly ventured beyond the barrier undetected, gathering intelligence on galactic activities while remaining completely invisible to alien sensors. What they discovered was a galaxy preparing for war on a scale never before seen. The Korthak Empire was building a fleet designed to subjugate every remaining free world. The Zephyrians were developing biological weapons capable of exterminating entire species. Even the mysterious Veil Collective was mobilizing forces for some unknown purpose. "They're going to destroy themselves," Holly reported during an emergency session of the Solar Council. "The galaxy that isolated us to prevent our destructive influence is about to commit suicide through warfare that will make anything humans ever did look like a minor disagreement." The irony was not lost on humanity's leaders. They had been locked away for being too dangerous, while the species that imprisoned them were preparing to annihilate each other. The galaxy's judges had become everything they accused humanity of being, while humanity had evolved beyond their original nature. As the 150-year mark approached, humanity faced a choice that would define their future role in the galaxy. They possessed the power to break free from their prison whenever they chose, but they also knew that their emergence would change everything. The question was whether they were ready for the responsibility that came with their new abilities. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now the oldest living human at 180 years thanks to life extension technologies developed during the quarantine, addressed this concern during her final public speech before retiring to one of the Genesis worlds. "We are no longer the species that was locked away a century and a half ago," she said to an audience that included representatives from every human settlement in the solar system. 50 years had passed since the Great Wall went up around their solar system, and humanity had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Commander Rick Johnson stood on the observation deck of New Olympia, one of 12 underground cities that now dotted the surface of Mars. Through the reinforced glass, he watched children play in gardens that should not have been possible on the Red Planet. The air they breathed was clean and fresh, generated by massive atmospheric processors that human engineers had built from scratch. The technology was crude compared to what the aliens probably had, but it worked, and more importantly, it was theirs. Every bolt, every circuit, every line of code had been created by human hands and human minds working together toward a common goal. "The harvest reports are in," said Dr. Amy Thompson, walking up beside him with a data pad in her hands. She had been one of the leading researchers on the Consciousness Project, the ambitious attempt to link human minds directly with computer systems. At 45, she still moved with the energy of someone half her age, driven by discoveries that seemed to come faster every year. Rick took the pad and smiled at the numbers. Food production was up 30% from last year, and they were growing crops that had never existed before the quarantine. Plants that could thrive in low oxygen, vegetables that produced more protein than any Earth variety, fruits that grew in half the time of their ancestors. Necessity had made humans into creators of life itself. The Neural Interface Project is showing promising results too, Amy continued, her eyes bright with excitement. We've managed to create a stable connection between human consciousness and quantum computers. The processing power is incredible, Rick. One person linked with our systems can solve problems that would have taken entire teams years to complete. The breakthrough had come from Dr. Carlos Vega, a quiet engineer who had been working on fusion reactors in the asteroid belt. He had discovered that human brainwaves could be synchronized with certain types of artificial intelligence, creating a hybrid thinking system that was greater than the sum of its parts. The first successful link had been made 3 years ago, and now hundreds of humans across the solar system were enhancing their minds with computer assistance. On Luna City, Director Kate Phillips oversaw the largest manufacturing operation humanity had ever attempted. The moon's low gravity and lack of atmosphere made it perfect for building things that would have been impossible on Earth. Massive factories stretched across the lunar surface, their solar collectors drinking in energy from the sun to power assembly lines that never stopped. "We've completed the new material synthesis plant," reported engineer Danny Torres, a young man who had been born after the quarantine began. He belonged to a generation that had never known the galaxy beyond their solar system, yet somehow seemed more optimistic about the future than those who remembered the time before the wall. Kate nodded, reviewing the specifications on her tablet. The new plant could create materials at the atomic level, arranging elements in patterns that nature had never tried. The results were substances stronger than diamond, lighter than aluminum, and more conductive than gold. They were building with materials that the alien races had probably never imagined. The breakthrough had required solving problems in quantum mechanics that human scientists 50 years ago would have said were impossible. But isolation had focused human creativity like nothing ever had before. Without alien technology to copy or alien knowledge to rely on, humans had been forced to invent everything themselves. The results were technologies that followed completely different principles from what the galaxy considered normal. Deep Space Monitoring Station, Echo 7, drifted in the darkness beyond Neptune. Its sensors pointed at the barrier that enclosed their solar system. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Torres had been stationed there for 2 years, watching for any changes in the energy patterns that kept them trapped. What he had discovered was both encouraging and disturbing. "The barrier is being tested," he reported during his weekly communication with Earth Command. "Ships approach from the galactic side about once a month, run scans, and then leave. They're checking on us, but they seem surprised by what they're finding." Admiral Carter, now in her 80s but still sharp as ever, listened to the report with interest. Human energy signatures had been growing stronger and more complex every year. Instead of the declining civilization the aliens probably expected to find, Earth and its colonies were blazing with activity that could be detected even through the barrier. "What kind of ships?" she asked. "Zephyrian mostly, but we've detected Korthak and Vale collective signatures too. They're not working together, Admiral. Each race is spying on us independently. This was valuable information. If the 3 major galactic powers were watching humanity in secret, rather than sharing information, it suggested they didn't trust each other. That might be useful when the barrier finally came down. On Earth itself, changes were happening that went far beyond technology. Dr. Sandra Martinez had been studying children born after the quarantine began, and her findings were remarkable. These young humans showed cognitive abilities that surpassed anything in recorded history. They learned languages in weeks rather than years, understood complex mathematics intuitively, and displayed creativity that seemed almost supernatural. "It's as if the pressure of our situation is causing rapid evolution," she explained to a gathering of the world's leading scientists. "When a species is isolated and faces extinction, sometimes it adapts quickly. We're seeing that adaptation happening in real time." The children born during the quarantine were different in other ways too. They worked together naturally, sharing ideas and resources without the competition that had marked previous generations. They seemed to understand instinctively that humanity's survival depended on cooperation rather than conflict. Jake Morrison, now retired from active service, spent his days teaching at the New Geneva Space Academy. At 73, he had lived to see his daughter become one of the leading engineers on the Jupiter project, humanity's attempt to harvest energy directly from the gas giant's massive storms. "Mr. Morrison," asked one of his students, a girl named Lisa Park, who couldn't have been more than 16, "do you think the aliens expected us to do all this?" Jake paused in his lecture about early space exploration and considered the question. Around him, holographic displays showed the current state of human civilization. 12 cities on Mars, 50 settlements on the Moon, hundreds of space stations throughout the solar system, and a population that had grown from 8 billion to 12 billion, despite being trapped in their cosmic prison. "I don't think they understood us at all," he said finally. "They saw us as destructive and aggressive, and maybe we were. But they didn't see what we became when we had something to build toward instead of something to fight against. The quarantine had done something the aliens never intended. Instead of weakening humanity, it had unified them. Without external enemies to fight or alien technologies to envy, humans had focused all their energy on improvement. They had solved problems that had plagued their species for centuries: poverty, disease, environmental destruction, and social inequality. Dr. Frank Williams led the Genesis project from a massive research facility built inside an asteroid. The project's goal was ambitious beyond anything humans had ever attempted: the creation of artificial pocket universes within their solar system. Using principles of quantum mechanics that they were still learning to understand, his team had managed to create spaces that were larger inside than outside. "We've successfully stabilized a pocket universe roughly the size of Earth," he reported during a system-wide conference call. "We can create entire worlds inside these spaces, complete with their own natural laws and physical constants." The implications were staggering. If humans could create their own universes, they were no longer limited by the physical constraints of their solar system. They could have infinite space for expansion, infinite resources, and infinite possibilities for growth. Captain Nina Davis commanded the first faster-than-light vessel ever built by humans. The ship existed partially outside normal spacetime, using principles of reality manipulation that human scientists had discovered while studying the barrier that trapped them. The vessel couldn't leave the solar system, but it could travel between planets in minutes rather than months. "The drive system is stable," she reported from the bridge of the Explorer. We're achieving speeds that should be impossible according to conventional physics. The aliens' barrier taught us things about space and time that we never would have learned otherwise." As the 50th anniversary of the quarantine approached, humanity had become something entirely new. They had not just survived their imprisonment. They had thrived beyond anything their captors could have imagined. The technologies they had developed, the social systems they had created, and the evolutionary changes they were undergoing would have seemed like magic to humans from before the barrier. But perhaps the most significant change was in how humans saw themselves. They were no longer a young species stumbling around the galaxy, trying to find their place among ancient civilizations. The stars looked different that morning when Jake Morrison stepped onto the bridge of his ship. He had been a captain in the Earth Defense Force for 12 years, but nothing had prepared him for what he was about to witness. The communication panel buzzed with urgent messages from every human colony in the solar system. Mars Base, Luna City, the mining stations near Jupiter, all of them were reporting the same strange readings. A wall was forming around their entire solar system. Jake watched through the main viewport as a shimmering barrier of blue energy slowly materialized in space. It started as thin lines of light that stretched between the outer planets, then grew thicker and brighter until it formed a complete shell around everything humans had ever built or explored. The wall extended far beyond Pluto, sealing them inside their cosmic home like prisoners in a cell. "Sir, we're getting a transmission from the alien fleet," said Lieutenant Amy Chen, her fingers dancing across the communication controls. The young officer had joined the crew only 6 months ago, fresh from the academy with dreams of exploring distant worlds. Now those dreams were turning to dust before her eyes. The main screen flickered to life, showing a creature that looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird. Its scales were dark green and its eyes glowed with an orange light that seemed to burn with ancient wisdom. This was Ambassador Thexel of the Zephyrian Empire, one of the oldest and most powerful races in the galaxy. "People of Earth," the alien began, its voice carrying through the translator with mechanical precision. "The Galactic Council has made its decision. Your species has shown itself to be too dangerous for the civilized galaxy. You expand too quickly, fight too often, and ask too many questions about things better left alone." Jake felt his hands clench into fists. Humans had only been traveling between stars for 50 years, and yes, they had been eager to explore, and sometimes quick to defend themselves. But dangerous? They had never started a war with any alien species. They had always tried to talk first and fight only when attacked. "We are not destroyers," Jake said into his communication system, knowing the alien could hear him. "We are explorers. We want to learn and grow and be part of something bigger than ourselves." The alien's head tilted slightly, and what might have been a smile crossed its reptilian features. "That is exactly why you are dangerous, Captain Morrison. Your hunger for knowledge and growth threatens the order we have maintained for 10,000 years. You will remain in this quarantine for 200 years. If you can learn to control your destructive nature during that time, we may consider allowing you back into galactic society." The transmission ended, leaving Jake staring at a blank screen. Around him, his crew worked frantically at their stations trying to find some weakness in the barrier, some way to break free. But the alien technology was far beyond anything humans had ever encountered. The wall was solid, impenetrable, and completely beyond their ability to overcome. On Earth, Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the Global Command Center, watching reports flood in from every corner of human space. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too much war and not enough peace. She had spent her entire career preparing humanity for threats from space, but she had always imagined those threats would come in the form of invasion fleets, not isolation barriers. "Ma'am, we've lost all contact with our deep space monitoring stations," reported Colonel Rick Davis, a sturdy man who had served under Carter for 15 years. "Whatever that wall is made of, our signals can't get through it." Carter nodded grimly. Humanity had built a network of sensor stations throughout the solar system to watch for incoming threats. Now those same stations were trapped inside with them, blind to everything happening in the rest of the galaxy. They were truly alone. Dr. Elena Rodriguez worked frantically in her laboratory on Luna City, analyzing the energy readings from the barrier. As Earth's leading expert on alien technology, she had been hoping to unlock the secrets of faster-than-light travel and advanced energy systems. Instead, she found herself studying the walls of their prison. "The energy patterns are unlike anything we've ever seen," she told her research team, pointing to the complex waveforms dancing across her computer screens. "It's not just a wall, it's a complete dimensional lock. They've essentially cut our entire solar system out of normal space and sealed it in its own pocket of reality." Her assistant, Dr. Paul Kim, looked up from his own analysis. "How long would it take us to develop something like this on our own?" Elena shook her head slowly. "Centuries, maybe millennia. We're dealing with technology that's probably millions of years ahead of ours." Back on Earth, President Helen Barnes addressed the world in a broadcast that would be remembered for generations. She stood behind the podium in the White House, her usually perfect hair slightly disheveled from hours of emergency meetings. The weight of leading humanity through its darkest hour showed in every line of her face. "My fellow humans," she began, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. "We face a challenge unlike any our species has ever encountered. We have been judged and found wanting by civilizations that have existed since before our ancestors first looked up at the stars. But we are not defeated. We are not broken. We are human, and that means we do not give up." She paused, looking directly into the camera as if she could see every person watching around the world. "They have given us 200 years to prove ourselves. 200 years to show that we can be better than they think we are. We will use every day of those years to grow, to learn, to become the species they believe we cannot be. When this barrier falls, they will not find the same humans they locked away. They will find something far greater. The reaction to the quarantine was different on every human world. On Mars, the colonists pulled together, knowing their survival depended on cooperation. On the Moon, scientists threw themselves into research with desperate intensity. On the asteroid mining stations, workers continued their jobs with grim determination, knowing the resources they gathered would be more important than ever. But it was on Earth where the real change began. Without the promise of new worlds to explore or alien technologies to discover, humanity turned inward. They began to look at themselves and their world with new eyes. Environmental programs that had languished for decades suddenly received unlimited funding. Social problems that had seemed impossible to solve became the focus of the world's greatest minds. Jake Morrison returned to Earth 3 months after the quarantine began, his ship one of the last to make it home, before all space travel was restricted to essential missions only. He stood in his small apartment in New York City, looking out at a night sky that seemed different now. The stars were still there, but they felt farther away, separated by more than just distance. His daughter called him that evening, her voice bright with the resilience of youth. "Dad, my teacher says we're going to be the generation that breaks free from the aliens. She says we're going to show them what humans can really do." Jake smiled for the first time in months. "Maybe she's right, sweetheart. Maybe she's right." Outside his window, the city hummed with activity as millions of people began the long journey toward proving they deserved their place among the stars. The quarantine was meant to be their punishment, but perhaps it would become their greatest opportunity. Time would tell if humanity could rise to meet the challenge that had been placed before them, or if they would remain forever trapped in their cosmic cage. The barrier around Earth's solar system began to shimmer and fade on a Tuesday morning that would be remembered as the most important day in galactic history. Ambassador Thexel of the Zephyrian Empire approached the weakening wall with a fleet of observer ships, expecting to find a humbled and technologically stagnant human civilization ready to accept their place as a junior member of galactic society. Instead, they found Admiral Jake Morrison Jr. waiting for them in a ship that made their advanced vessels look like ancient relics. The human admiral was the son of the captain who had witnessed the barrier's creation 200 years ago, but he bore little resemblance to the humans the aliens remembered. His ship existed partially outside normal space-time, its hull crafted from materials that bent light around them and engines that folded space itself to achieve impossible speeds. "Welcome back to our solar system, Ambassador," Jake said through communication channels that bypassed every encryption system the aliens possessed. "We've been expecting you." Thexel's scaled features twisted in confusion as he studied the readings from his sensors. The human ship registered energy signatures that were off the scale of his instruments, and the space around it seemed to ripple with forces he couldn't identify. More disturbing still were the readings from the solar system itself, which blazed with activity that suggested a thriving civilization rather than the declining culture he had expected to find. "Impossible," Thexel muttered, his orange eyes fixed on displays that showed impossible things. 200 years of isolation should have reduced them to a primitive agricultural society. The barrier dissolved completely, but not because the Galactic Council had deactivated it. The energy patterns showed clearly that the humans had taken control of their own prison and chosen to lower it themselves. They had gained mastery over the technology that had trapped them and were releasing themselves from confinement. Dr. Susan Taylor stood in the main laboratory of New Geneva Station, surrounded by technologies that represented humanity's greatest achievements during their centuries of isolation. She had been chosen to present humanity's case to the returning aliens, to show them what 200 years of forced cooperation and innovation had produced. "We've solved the problems that made you fear us," she said as holographic displays showed the aliens what humanity had become. Unlimited clean energy from quantum fusion reactors that leave no waste. Mastery over space and time that allows faster travel than anything you've developed. The ability to create life and entire universes where none existed before. The displays showed cities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, transportation networks that moved through parallel realities, and manufacturing systems that created matter from pure energy. They showed human colonies throughout the solar system, pocket universes containing billions of people, and technologies that could reshape reality itself. But most shocking of all was what the displays showed about human society. War had been eliminated completely, not through force but through the development of technologies that made conflict impossible. Poverty no longer existed because humans could create any resource they needed from basic elements. Environmental destruction had been reversed, with Earth restored to a condition better than it had been before humans developed industry. "You have become gods," Thexel whispered, his voice filled with an emotion that might have been fear or awe. "No," Susan replied gently. "We've become what you always had the potential to become. If you had chosen cooperation over competition, creation over conquest." The revelation that truly shocked the galactic observers came when they learned about humanity's response to the ongoing galactic conflicts. Rather than seeking revenge against the species that had imprisoned them, humans had spent decades preparing to help heal the wounds that centuries of warfare had inflicted on the galaxy. Captain Alex Wright led the first humanitarian mission beyond the solar system's borders, his fleet equipped with technologies that seemed miraculous even to advanced alien civilizations. The ships could restore dead worlds to life, provide unlimited energy to struggling colonies, and heal injuries that alien medicine considered incurable. "We've come to help," Alex announced as his fleet approached the war-torn Zephyrian border worlds. "No payment required, no political allegiance expected. We're here because every living being deserves the chance to thrive." The Zephyrian colonies were devastated by decades of civil war, their populations reduced to a fraction of what they once were, and their worlds scarred by weapons that left entire continents uninhabitable. The human aid ships went to work immediately, using terraforming technologies to repair ecological damage and medical systems to heal the wounded and diseased. Within days, worlds that had been dying were blooming with new life. Cities that had been reduced to rubble were rebuilt using human construction technologies that could create entire urban centers in hours. Most importantly, the humans brought technologies that made future warfare impossible. Defense systems that neutralized aggressive weapons and healing systems that could repair any damage faster than it could be inflicted. Dr. Jennifer Hayes had achieved the final breakthrough in her communication with the Watcher's ancient monitoring systems. The test results were in, and they revealed truths about the galaxy's past and future that changed everything. The quarantine was never meant to be punishment, she announced to the assembled leaders of human and alien civilizations. It was the final examination in a test that has been ongoing for millions of years. The Watchers have been evaluating every species in the galaxy, waiting for one that could break the cycle of violence and competition that has destroyed countless civilizations. The ancient monitoring systems revealed their full purpose at last. They had been watching every intelligent species that arose in the galaxy, recording their development and measuring them against criteria established by the galaxy's first civilization. Species that failed the test were left to rise and fall according to their nature. Species that showed potential were given additional challenges to help them grow. Humanity was the first species in galactic history to pass every test. "The cycle of galactic destruction is ending," Jennifer continued. "Every previous dominant civilization has eventually collapsed due to internal conflicts and the inability to work with other species peacefully. Humanity has proven that intelligence can evolve beyond those limitations." The implications were staggering. The Watchers' records showed that the galaxy had gone through dozens of cycles of growth and destruction, with each dominant civilization eventually destroying itself and taking most others with it. The current galactic powers, the Zephyrians, Korthax, and Vale Collective, were already showing signs of the same collapse patterns that had destroyed their predecessors. But humanity offered something different, a species that had gained ultimate power without being corrupted by it, that had achieved unity without oppression, and that chose to heal rather than dominate when given the opportunity. The final revelation came when the Vale Collective finally revealed themselves to be the descendants of the Watchers' original creators. They had been guiding galactic development for millions of years, waiting for a species that could take over their role as gardeners of galactic civilization. "We have grown tired," spoke Keeper Veltar, the first Vale Collective member to communicate directly with another species in over 1,000 years. "For eons we have guided the galaxy's development, but we are ancient beyond measure and long to rest. We have been waiting for a species worthy of inheriting our responsibilities." The Vale Collective's territory showed signs of technological stagnation, not because they were declining, but because they had transcended the need for constant advancement. They had achieved a state of existence that allowed them to manipulate reality at will, but the burden of shepherding younger species through their development had exhausted them over millions of years. Humanity will become the galaxy's new guardians, Veltar continued. You have proven that power need not corrupt, that diversity can coexist with unity, and that cooperation is stronger than competition. The galaxy is yours to nurture and protect. President Tony Rodriguez stood before the Grand Assembly of the Galaxy, addressing representatives from thousands of species for the first time in human history. The assembly met in a vast station that existed in folded space, allowing beings from across the galaxy to gather in one location. We accept the responsibility, he said. His words translated into thousands of languages by technologies that bridged not just linguistic, but conceptual differences between species. But we will not rule as the old powers did. We offer partnership, not domination. We bring healing, not conquest. The transformation began immediately. Human fleets spread across the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as healers and teachers. They brought technologies that eliminated scarcity, medical advances that ended disease and aging, and social innovations that allowed different species to coexist peacefully. Wars that had raged for centuries ended within months as human peacekeeping forces deployed defensive technologies that made violence impossible. Worlds that had been devastated by conflict were restored to life using terraforming techniques developed during humanity's isolation. Most importantly,